What's up guys, Virgil here for JRPG Central, and today we're going to be looking at Eon's HDMI adapter for the Nintendo GameCube. This is a plug-and-play, no mod required adapter for your GameCube that allows for HDMI output. Is this the best way to play your GameCube JRPGs on actual hardware? Let's find out. First things first, in the interest of full transparency, I did reach out to Eon, and they did supply the unit for this video. Though this is not a sponsored video, and I was not paid to talk about this product. These are my honest opinions and first impressions unfiltered. So, what exactly is the Eon GCHD? It's a fairly straightforward plug-and-play HDMI adapter for your Nintendo GameCube. It uses the component port on your GameCube to output the highest native resolution possible on real hardware directly to your TV. Its price tag of $149.99 US may seem a bit steep, but when you compare it to the almost $300 the original component cables go for on eBay, it becomes apparent that for hardcore GameCube collectors, this is a steal. And with many other adapters, they were either cheap and poorly made, they either infamously broke certain GameCubes, or they introduced input lag and things like that. And I'm happy to say that none of that is an issue here. The adapter introduces no latency, and is even officially supported by the best Super Smash Bros. Melee player in the world, Hungrybox. As for the unboxing experience, the unboxing itself is pretty simple with only the adapter and a small manual inside. But I feel like it cannot go without saying in any review of this thing that the box that it comes in is absolutely adorable. As you can see, it's clearly modeled after the GameCube down to the expansion gaps on the sides, and even the handle up top. As I said before, the adapter itself feels pretty well made. It's light, but not too light, and doesn't have a cheap handmade feel to it that some other adapters have. On the front, you can see the Eon logo, as well as a tiny plastic window that shows the internals once it's all plugged in and up and running. On top, there are two ports that plug into the GameCube. On the bottom, there is a button that we'll talk about more later on, and on the side, there is the HDMI output. And I think this is my only issue with the design. Having the HDMI on the side like this is a bit awkward and doesn't feel great when you're pushing against it while it's plugged into the system, though this can be easily circumvented by just plugging it into the adapter first and then plugging the adapter into the system itself. And when you do go to plug in the adapter into the GameCube, you're going to want to put a good amount of pressure on the adapter to make sure you hear a solid click into the system. The first two times I went to use the adapter, I thought that my unit was busted. Turns out that it's just a really snug fit into the system. Though I will say, after removing it and reinserting it about 20 times for the purpose of this video, it did get a bit looser over time. And with that in mind, I can say that removing it about 20 times did nothing to damage the unit itself or my GameCube. Touching on the little button on the back of the unit, if you hold that down, you can program a universal remote to allow you to kind of go in and edit things about the output. This gives you access to things like line doublers, scan lines, and things like that. I tried to make it work with the universal remote I had, and I couldn't get it to work, though pretty sure that's just on me. And for me personally, I wasn't too interested in scan lines or anything like that. But if you are interested in that stuff, that option is there. As I said before, this does use the component connection on your GameCube, so you will need to be sure that you have one of the earlier models of the system that has this port. To verify that your model is compatible, either look on the bottom for the model number DOL-001, or just look on the back to verify that it has this port here labeled Digital AV Out. And also, so not to cause any confusion, this Pokemon XD model I have here was originally a DOL-101 model, which is the model that is not compatible with the GCHD. But I swapped the inner components with the DOL-001. So if you're looking for a GameCube to buy for this adapter, this specific model I have here, the Pokemon XD model, will not work unless you or someone else does the same thing. Anyway, that's enough of the details, let's get on to the graphics comparison. Quick thing before we jump in, I cannot recommend enough that if possible, you watch this on at least a desktop, best case on a TV, as this will really help show the difference between the composite footage and the HDMI footage. So if you're wanting to get the most out of this video, I really recommend that you do that, if at all possible. So we're starting off with one of my favorite game series of all time, Fire Emblem. Starting out, as you can see, the colors are more vibrant on the GCHD, but it's definitely not a quantum leap between the two. It's an improvement for sure, but it wasn't one that immediately blew me away. However, when I got to the actual gameplay, I was incredibly impressed, to say the least. As you can see, the text box and the art of the character up top looks as though it's been completely restored. It's a night and day change. Overall, everything has more color, but also all of the grass has more detail, the character models have more detail, and what surprised me most, and this is a common theme throughout pretty much every game that we're going to talk about today, more than anything, the 2D elements of the game is what shines so much more. It's almost like comparing a PC version of a game to an old console game or something. It almost looks like you're playing it on an emulator. And the same can be said about combat too. It's a night and day change, and especially in movement, when you have the two side by side, it's very clear that the GCHD puts in serious work to clean up the image and put forth what the developers clearly wanted you to see, but that, unless you had this cable, you've just never been able to see these assets this clear on original hardware before. Next up is Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door. I would say this is another one of my favorite series, but similarly to Yoshi's Island, the series has been pretty lackluster outside of a game or two. In fact, I have a secret that I'm kind of ashamed to admit. While I am a huge fan of the original Paper Mario for the N64, I played it as a kid, I have huge amounts of nostalgia for it, it's such a great game. I've never really played Thousand Year Door outside of like the first hour, probably like 3 times. And in a weird way, I kind of like that. I've said this before to some of my friends that I love having a game like Thousand Year Door that is just, from literally all I've ever heard, an amazing game, an amazing follow-up to Paper Mario. I love having an amazing sequel to one of my favorite games on the docket for whenever I want to play it and jump into it. I just love having that on the backlog. It's like my favorite kind of game to have on the backlog, a game that you just know is going to be amazing, that's totally going to live up to your expectations. And as you can see, it gets a pretty decent bump from the GCHD. It does largely have 2D elements, but like I said before, 2D elements are really what kind of shine through this thing. And overall, it just makes the already amazing art style just that much more vibrant. So this might be the thing that pushes me to finally play this game. And in fact, making this video has kind of inspired me to finally not only go through Thousand Year Door, but I think I'm going to marathon through a ton of the GameCube JRPGs that are in my backlog. And our next game might be the first one I play, actually. Batson Kaitos, Eternal Wings and the Lost Ocean. This was a game that I picked up a couple years ago that I didn't really know a whole lot about, other than it was a Monolith Soft joint and that it was a GameCube JRPG. And so while I was making this video, I was going through and kind of tasting and playing the first 30 minutes of a lot of these games for recording, and out of all the ones out of this list that I hadn't played, that I was playing for the first time, this one easily grabbed me the most. It's got an awesome setup, the music is gorgeous, the environments are so incredible. The GCHD really extracts the absolute best out of some of these beautiful pre-rendered backgrounds. I was getting a Final Fantasy X like Besaid vibe from the opening town here. My only initial gripes with the game as I was playing it was, one, the card-based combat's kind of weird. They don't really do a whole lot to teach you how it works. It might not be that bad once I actually learn how it works, but it's different, so I don't know how I quite feel about it. But number 2, the voice acting is the most amazing train wreck I have ever heard in my life. Like, not only is it terribly acted, but it also sounds like someone either recorded it in a trash can or a car.
Never forget rule number 1. Buy your Magnus from a decent source, from people you can trust. In other words, us! Our Magnus are as fresh as can be. I mean, a custom-made winglet. Wow! Wow! Wow!
So I was kind of heartbroken as I was getting into this. I was like, man, this world and this art and this setup is all really cool, but this voice acting is so terrible. But as soon as I was able to get control of my character, went into the options, and thank God there's a toggle to just turn off the voice acting. So this is definitely one, this might be the first one out of these that I do a full playthrough of, but in my opinion, it was also the one to see the biggest boost from the GCHD in general. And next up after that is Batson Kaitos Origins. This is the prequel to the first Batson Kaitos, and even though it's a prequel, I will probably still play this after I play Batson Kaitos, the first one. And as you can see, it got a very similar treatment. It's also a very beautiful looking game, and the GCHD does a fantastic job of showing you just how beautiful the game can be. Though for me, the setup for it really didn't grab me like the first one. So if there was any thoughts between like which one I would play first, I'm definitely going to play the first one before I even touch this one. Up next was my most anticipated title to try with the GCHD, and that is Skies of Arcadia Legends. This is another one on the backlog for me that I have never played, but that I have heard nothing but good things about. And ultimately, as I was doing my tested, I was pretty disappointed with the results. Don't get me wrong, it does look better than it does in composite, but sadly, it's not nearly as big of a boost as, say, a game like Fire Emblem or the first Batson Kaitos. Though that's to no fault of the GCHD. See, what it is it's two things. One, the game was originally a Dreamcast game, and so as a result, it's a much older game. But the other thing, and I believe this is the biggest reason, is that it does not support progressive scan. And out of all the games I tested, they all did support progressive scan, and that was where you saw the biggest boost, I think, is with games that do support the mode. So again, it does look sharper, text is sharper, the entire game is a little bit sharper, but it's definitely not a night and day difference like it was with some of the other games we talked about. And I am still going to play this too, of course. And if I'm going to play it on a GameCube, this is still definitely the way to play it. But I was just a little bit disappointed after the pretty transformative results I had seen from some of the other games. But oh well. Up next is one of my favorite childhood GameCube JRPGs, and arguably the greatest on the system, Tales of Symphonia. For this comparison here, you can see we're doing the usual composite and GCHD comparison, but for fun, I went ahead and threw in some of the PlayStation 3 Remasters footage so that you could compare the two there. And I know you may be thinking that the PS3 might have the clear edge because it's in 720p, it was a current-gen remaster at the time, but the caveat with the PS3 version is that the PS3 version is a remaster of the PS2 Japanese version. And as you probably know, the PS2 was a much weaker system than the GameCube, and so because of that, the PS2 version wasn't quite as good looking as the GameCube version. For instance, the GameCube version runs at 60 frames per second, whereas the PS2 version ran at 30, so because of that, the PS3 version, although it is HD, does run at 30 frames per second, while the GameCube version runs at 60 frames. So I'll kind of leave it up to you guys to decide whether you like the PlayStation 3 720p 30 frames per second, or if you're a bigger fan of the GameCube 480p 60 frames per second version of the game. But the GCHD is not only useful for GameCube games. With the power of the Game Boy player, this can be one of the best ways to play your Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games on the big screen. I didn't record any footage in composite because I was kind of running short for time, but all the gameplay you're seeing here is cropped from the GameCube's Game Boy overlay and is pure direct footage from the Game Boy player through the GCHD. All of your Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games are going to look and sound as good as they possibly can thanks to the GCHD. Overall then, I really can't recommend the GCHD enough. For me personally, it's breathed new life into my GameCube and my GameCube collection. I can now actively play them on my TV, which I couldn't do at all before. If you're a huge GameCube fan and you can get past the hefty entry fee, I think the GCHD is a no-brainer. Anyway, that's it for me, guys. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the thumbs up. And I'm genuinely curious, down below, let me know which game you thought had the best showing out of all of the games I showed. Like, which one had the biggest improvement over its composite counterpart. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you all have a great day, and I will catch you in the next video.